What's up, everyone? Welcome. We are live right now in the CannaBuzz community. And if you're watching us on YouTube, thank you so much for watching. We have a great episode for you today. We're going to be talking all about regenerative growing and cannabis breeding and all sorts of different cool stories. I'm sure that I'm looking at the stories here. We've got regenerative farming, hash making, state of the market, breeding, all sorts of things that we're going to get into. But before we get too far into it, I need to get into a couple shout outs. First off, shout out to our friends at Lost Coast Plant Therapy. I'm wearing the hoodie right now. I've got the Lost Coast Plant Therapy right on deck right now because this is something that's going to be great in your grow. You can use it to fight any sort of bugs that are on your plants, or if you need to fight those botrytis or powdery mildew, things like that. Check out Lost Coast Plant Therapy at lostcoastplanttherapy.com. Huge thanks to Dirk and the family for supporting us, and look up our interviews with Dirk and his family as well on our channel. And then we've also got an interview coming up with them at the end of the year. Is that right, JR?
Yeah. It's going to be our kind of our send off to the new year.
Awesome. So we'll be giving away a hat that Dirk sent me, this really cool looking hat. We're going to be giving away that at the end of the show to one of our viewers. And before I get too far along, I also need to shout out our viewers in the CannaBuzz community. If you watch this show and you enjoy us, you can support us by going to CannaBuzz.app in your browser or search CannaBuzz in the App Store. It gives you access to our live chat so folks can ask questions at the end of the show or whatever, and we can interject those into the interview, all that kind of fun stuff. And then we also do those giveaways every week and every month. So join us over there. Use code GROWERSLOVE for 50% off. And then last couple shout outs, NeptuneSeedbank.com and TikiSeeds.com are genetics supporters. I'll go throw it over to JR for the Tiki shout out. What's going on with Tiki?
Well, actually, Tiki's got TikiCuts.com now. And he's offering some cuts at really reasonable prices for folks who are trying to reset, don't really have the ability to propagate. It's a really good option. So check out Tiki Cuts. And they all just did huge Black Friday sales, which I think you could still jump on if you're listening live today. And Neptune has his 30% off. It started Monday, and it's going all the way to the 4th of December. And he's got 30% off a big group. He's got 50% off another group and 70% off another large group of breeders out there who have some amazing offerings, such as our guest, Kaya. So I would really want to do is introduce Kaya. Kaya is from Pacific Northwest roots. He's been in the Washington area for years. I came across his coffee back in 2012. And our crew did a little breeding project with it. We'll talk about, but the man has been putting out some stellar genetics, and I really respect his journey. Neptune asked me, who of all the breeders are you really interested in interviewing? And Kaya was first on my list. His energy touches my heart, and his style is something that I think is important, and it's a conversation that a lot of people need to have. So welcome to the show, Kaya. We're really happy to have you and honored.
Thank you. Happy to be here. Hope you guys had a good holiday.
Yeah, it was a Thanksgiving. Definitely a Thanksgiving.
Very dank at my house, I can tell you that.
So, Kaya, we always start our guests off by asking them how did you fall in love with the plant, and how has it got you to where you are now?
My very first experience with the plant was in junior high, and my buddies got me to cruise with them after school. And it really didn't work. Honestly, it didn't work at all. It was terrible. Left a bad taste in my mouth. And then it wasn't till like my junior year that I kind of ran into Herb again. We were out, and I was so stoned. I mean, just like laughing, stoned, deliriously laughing. That first time high, which is always, so memorable. But I really wasn't like a regular user. That was like me, a once off kind of deal in high school. And I didn't really become like a a pothead until college. So, I was an athlete in high school, and I got really good grades. And when I went to college, though, it was like, all right, I was good. Now I get to experiment and do some things. And I had a sustained a head injury playing football in high school, and I didn't really know about the medical properties of weed. I was at the neighbor's house in the 808 apartments up in Bellingham, and the neighbors invited me over and got me stoned, and we were laughing. They invited me back, so I was over there like all week long, and I just felt so much better. And that also kind of led me to mushrooms, which I think also helped my brain to recover. I kind of know all that science behind that now, but that's really like where I fell in love was, helping, it helped me to just kind of recover my health, my mental health, and stabilize things in my life. And um, I was pretty quick to pick up the hustle behind it too, and figuring out, where I could procure it in larger amounts and move it around the campus. And that took care of me. So um, you know, ganja's been a great ally, my whole adult life.
We talk about that often on the show, like for folks like us who've had a decades upon decades relationship with the plant provides in every way. And can you kind of speak to that a little bit?
Well, so I came up in a real poor family, and that I even got to college was kind of, really crazy. And after the first quarter, I'd worked all summer and saved up my money. And after the first quarter, my money was gone. And but I got a government loan check, and I just started buying herb, and it literally took care of me, got me through college, paid all my bills, all my tuitions, helped out my friends that got behind. Um, it became a real provider, and basically my whole adult life. That's kind of what it's been. I had a little bit of a break when I got done with college, where I tried to go into the workforce, so to speak, and that just didn't work out well. It didn't, it's just not my thing. Um, the herb has always allowed me a certain freedom, especially with having family, that, I can spend more time with them. And, that's just a super blessing.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat. I mean, I was injured young, and I was able to leverage cannabis in a way that I was able to spend a tremendous amount of time with my wife and my children, which a lot of people don't get. The way they have things set up now with both members of the family grinding just to make it. I was able to avoid that, and so I was very blessed in that respect as well. So now, when you're on the college scene, what was kind of the cannabis like? What kind of strains were you getting, and how did that kind of start about?
So Bellingham is like an hour and a half north of Seattle, and maybe just 45 minutes south of the Canadian border. So, and it's a college town, so there was a lot of demand. There was a lot of local herbs, so people growing on, in the town, and that was always like the super highest grade stuff, and that was, $300 a zip, $1,000 for a quarter pound, something like that. And then there was a lot of herb coming down from Canada, and that stuff was a lot cheaper. But that was the work weed, it was still, comparative to today's prices, it's expensive. But, back then the local herb again was like 4,000 a pound. So the Canadian stuff was like, maybe 2,800, 3,000. And then it quickly got cheaper down, as you got more and more of it. But just locally, that was kind of where it was at on campus. So we really didn't see any herbs from California come up until after 9/11. There was so much coming down from Canada, And that's really, what was the scene was you had all this Canadian work and then you had the local high grade stuff, and every once in a while you'd see some really good Canadian stuff. Um, but it didn't make it too far south. If they sent something good over the border, we kept it locally and
Yeah.
sent off everything else, down to the big city. So
Yeah, we're a bit south of you, and we called it beasters. And we had guys that would just come in on Cessnas and drop the beasters right on the beach, and then they would scoop them up. And we lived in a tourist town in Seaside, so we always had that high demand, and that's kind of how I got started, was hustling grams and stuff like that. So how did you kind of develop your game on the college scene where you were getting clientele? I mean, it's not easy to just walk up to someone and say, "Hey, man, you want to buy some weed?" Or was it that easy?
Um, I learned fast. You make a lot of mistakes. Um, but I just kind of went all in. And I mean, like, there was some scary shit that happened, you know what I mean? And you had to restart from time to time. But um, I listened to a lot of hip hop and like a lot of the shit was like, you know, you could take lessons from that, and how to build structure to what you were doing and plan for success and be safe about things. Um, not to say that I didn't have my run-ins with law enforcement or with, just, ruthless people trying to take things from other people. And I mean, that was part of the shit, unfortunately. That's kind of weird, like after legalization, you've seen that went away a lot, and now
Yeah.
the stores are getting hit. But, for a while there, everybody was making money off weed. So, nobody's really trying to jack nobody. Um, but, in the late 90s, that was just part of the game. You really had to
Yeah.
watch your back and be very careful about what you were doing and who you were doing it with. You weren't just out there, blatantly advertising that this is what you did. It was a lot more low key. And in fact, you were trying to let as little people know who you were and what you did, as little contact, as little personal information. Nobody really knew anybody's name. It was all aliases. And you didn't want to know anything about anybody, because then you would be maybe looked at as, something did go wrong. Now they're looking like, oh, that guy knew something. So um it was really impersonal. But yet the amount of trust that you had to have with the individuals that you were working with was like super high. So yeah, it was different. It was different in the late 90s and the early 2000s. And after Bellingham, I was up there for like 3 years and ended up getting kicked out of the school because I wasn't attending class. And because I was out doing other things. And so I wound up down in Tacoma, which is just south of Seattle. And the hustle just kind of hit a whole new level when I got to the big city. And I really don't talk too much about all of that, but that was a whole different experience too. And it was kind of about that time that 9/11 happened. And so it didn't take long I mean, that Canadian stuff just dried up, like, done. No more, period. They shut that border the fuck down. Um, and then it didn't take very long before, the Cali weed was making it north. So that was kind of a whole transition period.
And even I'm sure you probably got some of that Southern Oregon stuff as well.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. That was some of the better outdoor stuff that we ever saw. What was the Jaeger and
Yeah.
raspberry Kush. Uh,
Yep.
and I actually got a lot of indoor stuff from Portland too back in the day. One of my best partners down there was operating like with the snow cap, and that was some tremendous weed coming out of Portland.
Yeah, well, we never had a really good outdoor situation here for the Willamette Valley or the coast, and so we started growing indoor like in the late '70s. I mean, I remember seeing metal halide weed when 1982, like when I was in eighth grade and shit. Like in our town, we didn't have brickweed. There was no demand for it. everybody was growing indoor chronic, and if it wasn't killer green bud, nobody really wanted it.
Yeah, and I would say like everything in Washington was indoor too, you know. Outdoor growing of herb in Washington just wasn't, I mean, maybe in Eastern Washington a little bit, but on the west side, everything was indoor. You know, you just didn't dare do it outside. You're gonna get caught, you know. Um, so yeah, indoor was just everywhere. Everybody had it in their garage. I think if people, what was a housing crisis thing like 2008? I mean, that people growing homegrown weed like saved so many people's mortgages.
Yeah.
You know, like it's crazy.
Yeah.
Shudder to think what would happen if that kind of same thing happened today.
So, at what point were you growing yourself? Because we're going to get into your story of breeding, but we also like to kind of tell that before you became a breeder, you were a grower. So, when were you kind of experimenting with growing and things like that? What kind of stuff were you growing in the early days?
Yeah, we played around like with the phototrons. Yeah, that was like 97, 98. You know, we had the little phototrons. You could order them out of High Times and just
Yeah.
add them peat moss, and um that was fun. And then we were like taking lights from campus and making our own little boxes. And yeah, it was pretty crazy. And then we did like a little outdoor thing on Blanchard Hill. And honestly, like it wasn't too much work, but we totally ruined the dry job on it. And then I just kind of went back to moving herb, and then didn't really grow again until 2003. And that was my first big indoor crop, you know, like hydroponic, full setup with, you know, 6,000 watts. You know, it was pretty serious. Um, and, you know, I think I did like 12 pounds, 11 pounds off that first indoor crop, and I was hooked. And then, you know, it was just kind of cash cropping after that. You know, I had to move my spot and set up a new one, and I was hooked. And, you know, because back then it was like, you know, 4,000 a pound, you know, and you could pop off a 6 lighter, 10 pounds. You know, I mean, that's amazing.
Provides well.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so that was kind of my, then it was basically I was just commercial growing like that. And when medical hit, you know, we kind of expanded gardens. And at the peak of medical, I had 3 different spots with like 12 lights. And I had, you know, helped open up a couple of the early brick and mortars in Washington, and did that for a while. But that was kind of like a game of whack-a-mole. You know, they were just, you know, as soon as we'd open up, they'd let us run for a little bit and then come in and rob us and shut us down. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, our medical was kind of similar here. And like our medical system was a beautiful system. We were able to grow for patients. We were able to provide for those patients. And yet we were still able to bring stuff to market as well. Everything was tested before it went on the shelf. Nothing was dirty about it. You know, the only thing they didn't really have figured out was the tax situation. So when they kind of packaged all that up and sold it off to the lobbyists and the attorneys who frameworked our recreation, that's when we all got fucked. And you were right at that point as well in your growing journey, correct?
Yeah. Yeah, that was actually, we were pretty active up here in Washington trying to stop them from doing all that. And that's a whole nother story. But about 14 years ago, I switched from you know, cash cropping with in hydroponics, and started doing organic soil. And that was part and parcel. I wanted to create an environment. I had starting to have children, so I wanted to have a different kind of environment in the garden so that it was safer for them. And also I started breeding, so I thought that was a better way to test my stuff. You know, I could really get an even base and see what different plants were doing. You know, there's just too much variability in hydroponics, and with the organics, I could let the plant take what it wanted, and I could take notes on that. So that was really kind of an integral part of the growing and the breeding. And then again, this was just basically like buying organic soil at a store, and then a couple years into it, it evolved into living soil stuff and figuring out how all of that worked. And it's been a journey, I think, for anybody. You have to understand that it's a journey. It's to understand how these things work and how to incorporate them. And you can learn to do more with less. So that was kind of how all that kind of went hand in hand. And then I kind of found myself in the Dampier community, and they're just incredible teachers. And I immersed myself in the Korean natural farming, and just trying to get a better understanding of how microbiology works in nature. And that's kind of been where it all led me. And that's how I do things now on my farm. So
Yeah, I don't. Did you go to that regenerative conference that we had here in Portland where Kelly and Joshua Rutherford, I think a bunch of us got together during those regenerative conferences, and that's kind of how I found Josh and Kelly, was through that program. Can you kind of talk a little bit about the Dragon Earth Medicine program and the closed loop regenerative farming type stuff?
yeah, and if anybody really wants more information, you can check out their website. They've got a really detailed website, and it goes through all the qualifications and stuff. But essentially, you're partnering with Mother Nature, and you're closing loops on your farm so that you're building soil and you're building land, and you're using the things around you instead of buying things from the store and bringing them in. And it's really about closing loops on your farm. And that's kind of the idea with anything that's regenerative is nobody shows up and waters the forest with a hose or brings nutrients to the rainforest, right? It all just, nature works in a certain way. And you're basically just trying to mimic that kind of cycle and to partner with nature. And that's really the quintessential heart of the whole regenerative and dem pure philosophy. Is you're partnering with nature, and you're taking care of nature, and she's going to take care of you. And it's creating life, it's building soil. And when you strip away all the marketing, it becomes, this is just a natural thing for us to do. And you really only just have to look around, look outside. If you're in that kind of environment, if you're in the urban environment, it's a little more difficult. um but that's kind of the basic concept behind dem pure.
And
And
Jim Pure, is it in line with like Jadam and KNF practices, or do they kind of have their own ways of developing nutrient cycling?
well, I think there's a lot of shared elements, but to be clear, these are fully different practices. Korean natural farming, that's, everybody knows, that's Master Cho, and Jadam is his son. And regenerative, I don't know that anybody really claims to like hold the lock and key to regenerative or polyculture or permaculture. These are really old concepts that are just being revived and popularized, and it's really awesome to see it, right? Like, we understand that we have to have a higher quality of food production. We understand that we need to have control of our food production, right? These are like crucial to our sovereignty. And this doubles for our medicine, right, and our herbs. So that's
When
that's
you
really crucial. But these are all different schools of thought, and again, they share and intertwine different methodologies. But Elaine Ingram, and the Soil Food Web, and it's really neat. I've been to some of these conferences, and it's neat to see the people get to talk, and you get to kind of observe and make your own, draw your own conclusions, and then go home and practice on your farm and see what works for you. But the basic idea is really to give life, to build life, to use the natural resources around you, and to use those natural processes to create fertile soil, that is alive. And what makes the soil alive is the microbiology. It's not, the levels of minerals in it. It's the amount of life in it. So
When you kind of take a step back and look at all the different things that you're doing as a part of this grow style or these growing practices, I was curious if you feel like there's a couple things that jump out to you as shifts that you feel like make a remarkable change or remarkable difference. Because I'm sure, I feel like as a grower, I come across things that I do and I'm like, oh man, that made a big difference. And I was just curious, since you went from one grow style that was totally different to now this whole other school of thought, I was curious if you kind of feel like there's a couple things that kind of jump to mind for you.
that's a really great question. So when I was doing hydroponics, we initially were doing, a nutrient film technique. And there was always a little water in the bucket, and the roots, when they hit it, they would die. And um, at some point, I figured I'm going to put a air stone in there, and we'll put a little more water in. And at that point, like, the growth just exploded, right? Like, I added air to it, I added a little more water. The growth just was like, it was like, holy cow, this is how I should have been doing it the whole time, right? Yields doubled. It was crazy. Um, Same thing in the soil stuff. I was buying these water only bags, um, thinking that, this was organic, was good, right? And it was good, but it wasn't alive. So when I figured out how to make it alive with teas, and with KNF, figuring out how to shepherd these indigenous microorganisms, and then to learn how to use hugel beds. Like, I think hugel beds are just like the way to go, for so many reasons. So just understanding that evolution in the soil, both styles, you just kind of need to add more fuel to it, or the right ingredients, and it all of a sudden it's like, oh wow, this is what it's really all about. I imagine there's some people out there growing organic stuff not getting great results, and not quite comprehending that organic does not mean that it's living. It doesn't. They can work together, but you have to bring that life in. And I think, if you're watching, worm casting teas is an excellent start, way to do that. If you can go collect some leaf duff, that's a great way to go. In the Jadam practice, you can make the with a potato and some leaf duff and a little bit of a 5-gallon bucket of water with a little bit of sea water in it, and you can make microbes that way, and just to kind of give it a little start. So it's really easy, it's really simple, doesn't cost anything. It's fun.
Talk about that leaf method again. What's the leaf thing?
So when your leaves, like, I've got a pile of leaves down here, I just went out and
As
and
do I.
raked them up into a pile, right? So with grass clippings, you want to leave them out and let them dry. And once they're dry, then you can collect them and compost them, or compost them in place. With leaf, when the leaf falls down, like your maple leaves, pile it up, right? And then let it sit in that pile. And after a while, the microbes will come up, and you'll actually see, filament of the mycelium in there, right? And once that's kind of built up in there, then you can take that leaf matter and go redistribute it onto your garden beds or whatever. And that's a great way to inoculate or bring life into that area. And then I like to cover it with mulch. I like to put straw on top or some wood chips on top, just to keep it warm and alive during the winter. But yeah, leaf mulch is top quality, top grade for bringing in microbes into your zone. Super cheap, super easy. Just pile them up, let nature do the work, and then redistribute them.
I was told that the nematodes that feed and populate in that process also feed and devour powdery mildew fungi in the soil. And them and bacillus bacteria are a natural predator to the powdery mildew fungus. And so I was told that the nematodes that are in the leaf mulch provide great help in reducing that life cycle of powdery mildew in your soil.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Man, you pulled that one out. That's some knowledge drop right there.
Thanks, bro.
I love it.
Hey,
Yeah,
and I
for
got that
real.
from Joshua Rutherford. I was listening to Joshua talk about one of the studies that he was into, and that they had just meant. This is just within the last 8 months or so, I would say.
Huh.
And I've always been, because here in the Northwest, powdery mildew is just a thing, And so, like, I stopped bringing in cuts, and I only started hunting seeds because I was tired of people handing me plants infected with powdery mildew. And they say, oh, yeah, it's in your environment. It's in your environment. Yeah, it is. It is. But if you have an isolated indoor environment and you're hunting from seed only, the chances of you getting powdery mildew are pretty slim.
Yeah. Even outside, the seed plants are so much more hardy.
Yeah.
They just really are,
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I did that this year. I had plants that I started from seed, and it was just so amazing how thick the stalks were compared to the ones that I started from clone, and how much they got bigger faster at different growth spurts. It's just interesting to watch that. Another thing, a nerdy question I was going to ask you about growing real quick, because you mentioned hugelkultur. So are you growing in like big beds? Is that kind of what you're growing in? Because it seems like part of growing in this style, it seems like the more the merrier in terms of soil, right? And it kind of having that big amount of grow space helps kind of, yeah, exactly, has this whole life force in it, and that's really helpful. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think to a degree, and I grow in a lot of different environments, right? So, and I got a lot of different situations happening, so I've done indoor in beds, right? And I build it like a hugelkultur. I put down stone first and then wood, and do the whole nine and build like mini hugel beds in that bed, right? Because it saves you money on topsoil. It's a better situation. It helps with the watering. You know what I mean? So you can do that indoors. Green Life Productions is like, they've got the model. They're crushing it on, their 30 something runs in the same bed.
That's insane.
And they set it up that way.
Wow.
So, you can do it in that situation too. In greenhouses, I've done it with heated stuff, but again, I build it the same way, and then out here on my property right here, I dug out holes and built it into the ground because it's really gravel. So there's just, different situations, but you can repeat that whole process in any, even in big pots. Smaller pots, not so much. You need such a certain size before it will kind of sustain life. But having limits to it as well, like Brandon Rust was saying, he did some experiments with a 12-inch bed versus an 18-inch bed, and it was a little easier to keep that 12-inch bed evenly kind of saturated, so that it wasn't too wet, wasn't too dry. With the bigger bed, there was a little more fluctuation, and he thought that he got better results in the smaller. So there's all kinds of little factors to kind of consider, but being aware of that, and how much resources do you have to invest, and hey, how big are you trying to get these plants? Maybe if you've got a smaller environment, you only want a 12-inch bed. Maybe you've got a bigger environment to fill, so you want to go a little deeper and grow a little bit bigger plants. I don't think there's any real hard fasts about things like that. You just kind of gotta fit it into your situation.
So one of the things I think you could maybe pass down to folks that'd be really helpful. We're trying to understand these organic systems and living systems. The Jedi skills required for top dressing. Can you talk about reading the plant and knowing what to top dress, when to top dress, and how?
Yeah, again, it's strain specific, right? So you got to know your plants, and that's why if you kind of grow the same one over and over again, you can get to know that better. If you're growing from seed, a little more difficult, so that's where, for me, I like to just kind of have that soil dialed, get that region dialed, right? And only way to know how dialed it is to test. Like, don't just go pouring things on top, because you can really go out of balance. So I really encourage people to do some soil testing and get your levels proper or close enough to where you're at. Make sure your microbial life is up, and then just let it ride. But, it's not an instant thing, right? With hydroponics, you can make a shift really quick. In soil, there's a response time that takes a little bit longer. Okay. And what I like to do is I also like to kind of prep the soil, like prebiotics, right? I want to put down some teas first, right? And then wait until the next watering, and then I'll feed. And then the next watering, I'm just going to water. And then the next time I'll put down teas, feed, and then water. But that way you're prepping the soil, because I want that microbial exchange. I want the microbes there to eat the food, right? Some people make the mistakes in Korean natural farming. They're putting inputs in, but they don't have the IMO in there. They don't have the life already, right? So there's nothing there to digest it and make that.
There's no availability. Yeah.
Make that microbial exchange. So you have to make sure that that's in balance. So I always encourage you to put the life down first, and then if you're going to add your top dress, then you can top dress and then water in. And I think that's smart, but you got to be ahead of the curve. And I think that testing is really crucial too. So you're not just pouring stuff on top and getting things more out of balance. Yeah.
I know for people here in Oregon, you can send soil samples in to the Department of Ag, and they'll test them for you. Are those resources also available in Washington as well? Or how are you getting your soil tested, I should say?
Yeah, I've got a buddy that has done Elaine's class, and he comes out and does the samples and sends them off to a local lab. So yeah, those are totally available.
Yeah, because I think that's really important, because especially if you're in an outdoor system, what the natural setting provides you may not be 100% adequate. Or I've even had a friend who grew out on Sovi's Island, and his product at the end of the year ended up failing because the corn farmers had leached so much crap into the watershed, into the soil, that it made his entire crop dirty. And so had he done a proper soil test prior to that, that he would have maybe seen that some of those things were toxin and out of balance, and maybe saved himself,
A water test is also very crucial. And if you're in a place that is an agricultural spot, you might think, oh, that sounds good. If they're using, kind of the commercial technologies that folks have been using, that's going to be some really toxic water. Up in Arlington, the water is really, really, really bad. There's just so much runoff from the cattle farming stuff, and then the big crops they're running up there too. It's really, really bad. So, you might be on a good aquifer, but the only way to know is to test,
Makes a lot of sense.
Condition your water before you do anything with it.
Well, JR's favorite subject, I think, is up next here, hash making. JR, do you want to kick us off into the hash section?
Yeah. So are you of the kind of Frenchy school of hash making, or are you into more of the modern rosin tech, or even if you could even talk about dry sift a little bit?
Honestly, I love it all. And I respect.
So you personally, when you're making your hash, what is your style?
I do a little bit of everything, honestly.
Break it down.
I got people who want everything, so I make everything. And it works out. I make the highest grade, air dried 6-star, and production rosin, and some people like dried stuff that's full spec, and they want to put it in with tobacco, and there's room for everybody. You know, I
So tell
love
us
hash
about
and
the
all the
six
small.
star. That six star is something I'm interested in.
Yeah, so that's kind of my specialty. I won a whole bunch of competitions with it. Um, and it's something that, you know, I was part of the group of guys that were kind of figuring out how to make dabbable hash. And you know, I've been through all the phases of microplaning and you know, kind of know all the applications and you know, to make true six star, we're talking about, you know, the highest grade, the purest, most unprocessed. You know, I think rosin's great, but it's just a step further processing, right? So if you
Yeah.
can, the very least, you know, I think of processed foods and stuff. So if you can do the very least with this thing and get that expression, that's kind of like the truest form, right?
Yep.
And not every plant has the correct consistency, trichome consistency, right? Like there's different, you know, some are more greasy, some are, you know, so they're going to handle the process differently. But you know, I like to be very delicate in the harvesting of the plant. Get it frozen on sheet pans, like kind of a flash frozen. Then it can be bagged for storage. Um, you know, wash it, get it out. Um, you know, we do like a little wicking to dry it. So we get the scoops out, we put it on like a 25U with some paper underneath it so it wicks out to a certain degree. You'll kind of see you don't let it go too long because if it gets is out too long, it becomes kind of melts on itself and then it won't go through the sieve. And if you get it when it's too wet, then when it comes out of the sieve, it's too wet and it's kind of sloppy. So you kind of got to eyeball it to kind of know that perfect time to pull it up, scoop it up, put it in a sieve, um, and then, you know, push it through with a spoon onto full cookie sheets. And basically the object of the game is to get that hash into very small particles. So it's got small surface area, and then I put it on cookie sheet racks, and I air dry it. And you know, depending on your control of that environment, you can air dry it pretty quickly, or you know, you can take a week or two. I kind of like the slow methodology. I think it gives it like a better cure. The faster methodologies obviously save you time and maybe a little color, but yeah, that's kind of the process. And then at the end of it, you can scoop this hash up and you know press it out, you know, in your fingers or on a piece of parchment paper, and you know give yourself a dab. Call it dabbing a flag. You know, and so you can take your dab and it's, you know, it hasn't been rosined. It's the top grade. You know, you should be able to look through it. There shouldn't be any pepper in it. A lot of times, if you're seeing those dark spots, it's probably dust. You know, a lot of farms have that dirt roads next to
Yeah.
them.
Yeah. Right.
You
Right.
know, dust is the enemy of hash. So if you can put down cover crops all over, that's really crucial. Don't be driving near your crops because that it's just hard to get out. It's stuck in there. So real six star, the top grade isn't going to have any specks. It's going to be melt like water, leave little to no residual at all in your dabber, and yeah, it's a more full bodied experience. You know, it's a more well rounded high. I think it's definitely superior to rosin in a lot of ways. Rosin is obviously, you know, more accessible and easier to handle for, you know, the average everyday consumer. But you know, here's some six star from my friend the trichome tortoise.
That's
So
awesome.
can you so you mentioned that as a wash process. I know that like back in the day they would bounce off different screens and dry sift to try to achieve that same goal. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So, and that's kind of, you know, the ancient technique. That's you know, they would dry their herbs even on the roofs, get it super dry, and then put it over drums that have been with tight screens over it, and then they beat the herbs on it, and the crystals fall through, and then you can just make, you know, grades of screens, U's, right? So a 90U, which is each U is basically like the size of a human cell. So you can imagine, and so you're just catching different size trichomes. The bigger trichome means it's got more juice on the inside as to the cuticle on the outside, right? So a smaller trichome head is going to have more cuticle as compared to inside juice ratio, right? So the bigger the head, the more melty typically, and that's kind of what hash makers are looking for. But with dry sift, the screening is a great way, or they call it carding. And then, taking that to a next level, you can use static friction to further separate the contaminant from the heads. And that's a really cool little trick that you can find videos on using gloves and all kinds of stuff. Video cartridges. There's all kinds of ways to do it, but essentially you're creating static electricity, and that's going to pull your trichomes one way and your contaminant the other. And we can say contaminant, it's typically plant matter, very fine pieces of the carbon matter, the leaf, the bud flower, the hairs, that's just kind of stuck in the hash or didn't make it out in the cleaning process. But yeah, so that's kind of dry sift. Some of the first, like full melt hash that I ever had was dry sift. And then I got to meet Cuban grower when he entered
Shout out to Cuban grower. Wow.
Yep. When he entered his first competition, he did it under the Roots banner. And and that was like the first hash. He came over, my buddy kind of linked us, and he came over and was letting me sample it, like, what do you think of this? And
blessings, bro. I
hit that one and like my legs went numb,
Oh my God.
Shit, bro. It was some haze hash, I'm like, woo, bro, like I can feel it in my legs. This is crazy, gave me crazy anxiety. I'm like, you can go win with that one. And I think he placed third. He should have won. It was awesome.
Yeah. He did the High Times Cup with that. I was amazed. I couldn't believe it, man. Because it was the only entry of its kind.
Yeah. He kind of pioneered that whole thing, and took it and ran with it. And it took a long time before anybody with water hash beat him. Like him and Exotic Mike, they were on a run for years, and that was really impressive to watch.
I would love to get that interview with Cuban. I don't know if he does interviews or any. I want that guy. I want to see his butt in a chair. I have so many questions, and he's such a pioneer. I mean, even now, I'm talking to dudes that are telling me the Cuban tech is evolving and getting crazier and crazier by the moment.
Oh, I believe it. I remember when he first showed me, and I've been making water hash. And he showed me, we're out on my deck and he's doing this thing. And I looked at him because he got done, right? I mean, it took him 10 minutes and he's got this big jar of beautiful cleaned up. And I'm like, that's it, bro. Like I got kill myself in the washroom for hours to get this hash. And you just did this magic like so quick and effortlessly, like I was fully fucking amazed. Like that was awesome. It was absolutely amazing. And so I think he really took, an ancient, because dry sift is kind of like, one of the original hash forms. And he really took that ancient craft and took it to a whole nother level. So that's really kind of a cool thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Right on. Right on.
I think dry sift kind of it's got a different profile. It's got a different consistency. I know that the piatella is kind of a big thing. I would like to see maybe some piatella from some dry sift from somebody. I don't know if that would even work, because it's probably not as volatile, but I don't know. I'd be interested in it.
Well, let's talk about your genetics and talk about what you're breeding with these days. What's kind of available out there, and I'd love to know because I'm sure there's going to be lots of people watching that are new to you and kind of just learning about you. I'd love to know the strains that you are breeding with, and sharing with the community why you're excited about them, what you feel like they contribute to the scene, or why you have them in your garden.
Yeah, so coffee is still kind of my flagship, and I've still been working coffee lines, and kind of next turn with coffee is we've done some breeding with my good friend OG Ghost over at Kush Family, breeding coffee with the OG. Some testers right there. And it's like I'm super stoked for that one. It's crazy strong. But breeding, so we did a BX. I BX, which means back cross. So I back cross my coffee before, and then I also have passed off some of my genetics and given permissions to a lot of the Dem Pure family guys to breed down stuff. So Green Source, Nicholas took, coffee from F3 out to I think he's at 8 or 9 now. Some other guys have taken those and branched them off to 5s and done breeding projects. And I really think that's kind of a cool contribution to the whole to the genetic pool, because these guys are doing breeding that a lot of people aren't doing with, they've got their other strain stuff that they've worked too, right? And bred out, line bred and got it out to certain spots and stabilities. And now we're breeding those together, which there's nothing really like that on the market. And they're also being raised and selected under the sun, moon, and stars, out in nature, in these gardens, using regenerative permaculture techniques. So they're super healthy. They've got built-in resistance. These are going to be the genetics you want to run, or that you want to take and build, use as the building blocks for your own breeding programs in any kind of region where you're doing outdoor growing. So I think that's really super awesome. And some of these guys have also done, like I don't like to take in clones. So Chonetics, he took a whole bunch of the crazy California hot elites and did a breeding project versus a coffee F5. And, I can make those available to people. But I didn't have to bring them into my spot either, and I know breed true because it's an F5 that, we've selected down so far, and then they've got to pick what works best in their zone and then breed to that. So I think that that's kind of a really cool model for how people can breed and work together. And for the
I want to give you a shout out here in my little bag here of seeds. This is OG Kush crossed by a coffee male that we got. I think this is like 2012, and this was an outdoor project that we did here in the Pacific Northwest. And I'm going to use these beans here to get my mail. This is where I'm going to get my mail. And we had a few selections from that, and one of them was most amazing. And I really wasn't smart enough to keep stuff around, but it smelled to me like walking into a Dunkin' Donuts shop. It was amazing. It was sweet, doughy, and coffee all day. It was really wonderful. So I'm having an opportunity to start maybe do some breeding projects, and this is where I'm going to get my mail.
I love it.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate that.
I hope you find a killer in there.
That's so cool.
I love that sweet Afghani. For me, that's what I'm after in these different phenos that we were sniffing on and smoking on. Some were really acrid and really gassy, but I like the more sweet Afghani. To me, that's that caramely kind of stuff, the donut stuff. I love that. That's my jam.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you guys actually to explain the coffee, since I am not familiar with it. And I was going to say, I'm sure some viewers aren't familiar with it too. So you've already got me interested in it. So tell us about the coffee strain and why you feel like it stands out.
All right. So I'll give you the quick, long version. When I was up there doing those deals up with the Canadians, we used to have this connect, and he would give us this Afghani hash plant, and it was fucking unreal. I mean, the buds looked like Star Cruisers from Star Wars. They were just these big pyramid-shaped gap cover, just ooh, and the smell was just the sweetest Afghani. It was so good, and I had that link for maybe 8 months and lost it. That was like top 3. That, Northern Lights, and Pez were my top 3 all time. And so when I started breeding, I thought maybe I could recreate one of these strains, right? And I didn't have any Northern Light seeds or anything like it. I couldn't find anything like the Pez, but I did have 2 Afghani strains, and I knew that was Afghani hash plant. So I figured, okay, I'll breed these together and maybe I'll hit something, right? So the Afghani strains that I had were an Afghani Kush, an Alien Kush, and then the Alien OG. So the Alien OG from Swerve, and that was Tahoe OG times Alien Tech. Alien Tech came from Obsolete. Okay. And then my mentor had given me a combination, a sister and a brother, of Alien Kush F2, which was bred by OG Rascal. And he had won that at a seed auction. At the time, it was like the most expensive pack of seeds ever to go at auction. It was like $1,500 for a 10 pack. And so he gave me the keeper sister and the male. I didn't really like the Alien OG female that I had. It was really pretty, but it didn't have much of a nose on it. But anyways, I bred those together. That was my 10th breeding in my first deal. I bred those together and I ran this whole big testing room, and I had 10 of those females under one lamp. And they were all like crazy covered in trichomes. Like I never seen plants like this coated in trichomes. But when I cut them down, some were pretty blah. This one was like incredible. As soon as I pulled it up, it was like, holy shit, this is it. This smells just like that Afghani hash plant. And that's the one that I ended up keeping. I had to re-veg it. I had grown 100 females in this 10 lighter. I picked 16 to keep from the 10 different crosses, and the coffee was the only one I got to re-veg. And thank God it came back. So that's the story.
Crazy how that works, huh?
Coffee's origin.
Like
I prayed on it. I was like, please, please. Giving him the Epsom salt water and praying, please.
For sure. Yeah.
You know, and then from there it's kind of history. You know, I just kept breeding it. That was like, of all the ones in that room, that had my attention, and that kind of is where the whole breeding program for Roots started. And you know, we've been going.
That's really cool.
I have a pack of your caffeine. Can you talk about that cross and what that was?
Yeah, that was Exotic Mike gave me his personal cut. They call it the Hee Haw cut of Extreme OG. So it was at Extreme OG, and I crossed that to my coffee, and that's what that was. Yeah.
Yeah, it's in my treasure.
You might probably could find pictures of it or something. But that was back in the day. They called it the Hee Haw cut.
Yeah, I'm stoked. Yeah, it's in my treasure chest.
Nice. You got some old ones, man. That's awesome.
Yeah, you know, it's like I come across stuff and I give out. I mean, you can ask Sam. We've given away
a lot,
hundreds of packs of seeds by now, and it's all through people's generosity. And but there is always that certain cluster that are for me, and because I do want to breed at the, you know, I'm getting to the point now where I might have an opportunity to make that a reality, and so I'm excited. And so I've had this little treasure chest of stuff I've collected over time from folks that I'm really excited to get into.
Yeah, awesome. You know, for me, the best part of breeding is seeing the progeny, you know.
Yeah.
Seeing what comes of your selections, you know. And the first breeding project that I did, I used that one male against 10 different elites that I had, you know, that I had grown over the years, and I really knew these girls. And so when I got to see what happened to these girls, you know, what kind of babies they made from this boy, it was like a light bulb in my head went off. Like it was crazy, you know, to see all the different, you know, all these ones are the same, and this one's, and that one was more of a shotgun, you know, and so you could figure out that the mom was more pure or not. Like it was just mind blowing, you know, and from that point I was kind of hooked on growing, you know.
To me, it's like you're using biology to create chemistry, and each individual expression and in the way you make it express is its own chemistry at the end of the day. And so I think the value in all these unique expressions are things that really can serve humanity in so many different ways. And I think the power of breeding and creating these things, I think it's like, you know, it's like you take that mindful, focused, and direct action, and at the end of your results, you've created this thing that might, you know, really severely impact the way people live their lives. And I think that's powerful and important. And so at the end of the day here on CannaBuzz, we want to celebrate the people who put it in the ground to the people who put it in the air. And so without you breeders, we can't put nothing in the ground. And so blessings to you for that, for sure. Um, we're kind of wrapping up on the end of it. And we always have one of those final questions that I like to do. And because you are spiritually connected, I would like for you to maybe talk about a really profound spiritual moment you had in your cannabis journey.
Oh man, there's so many. um, are we talking like just from like being irie or just in general with the plant or
Just from your heart, brother.
yeah. And it's such a hard one to put my finger on because it's the plant is just it's a sacrament for me, you know. So its effects it's like an everyday thing. Um and it has shaped my entire life, my family, my children, you know, our spiritual beliefs. Um, you know, I can't even put to words how grateful I am for it, you know. So I'm just kind of at its service. Um, I don't think I've ever felt more blessed by it than, you know, when I had figured out that it was healing my brain, you know, from this depression that was, you know, like stalking me. I knew that I wasn't sick. I knew I had a great life. I had nothing to be sad about, right? But I had this thing in my head. Um, and the herb literally chased that away and gave me this new path. And um I've been so grateful for that that I've just never been able to walk away from it and do anything else. So in that sense, you know, that first experience of, you know, and it wasn't necessarily intentional. You know, I was just going to get stoned. But then when I figured out, wow, this is actually kind of helping me, you know, and then later on, when the evidence came, right, and you could find things online talking about the endocannabinoid system and how this works. Um, it started opening up new doors and now I'm reminded at some point I was working with this doctor in Tacoma, this naturopath, Dr. Andrew Reif, and he called me in and he said, I have a special case. I got this kid, he's 3 years old, and he has Poems disease, and it's he has infinitesimal seizures, and he's now like a quadriplegic. So he has these seizures, they don't stop, they continue, and he wasn't able to develop the neck muscles and stuff. And the mom said that the child was having an issue with ingesting food and he's kind of starting to wither. And so she was fed up with Western medicine and she came to Dr. Reif, who is a naturopath, graduate of Bastyr, and doing work in Tacoma. And Dr. Reif called me in and he said, I want you to work with me. I'm going to figure out a nutrient plan for the kid, but we need to get cannabis in his system. How can we do that? And the kid was on a G tube, so we figured out we could juice the herb and administer it through the G tube. And I made up some juice for the mom and gave her this juice. And she called a week later. Doctor called me and said, "Hey, would you go meet her again? She needs more." I said, "Yeah." So I go meet her in the parking lot, and she gets in the car and immediately breaks down. And she tells me that her kid hasn't had a seizure in a week. And like we're just in there bawling. And she leaves. And the next week she comes back again, and I got more juice for her. And she says, "My son looked at me for the first time since he was a week old. He made eye contact with me." And you know, when she left that time, I remember just breaking down in the car and you know, thanking God for this experience and asking him for more, you know, saying, bring me more people to help. What can I do here? And that was like the probably the single greatest feeling I ever had of being able to help somebody in that situation, with this simple plant. So, that was probably the strongest spiritual moment, realizing that this isn't just a weed. This is really something powerful that we really should hold in a higher regard, and I kind of feel like, the marketing and everything else behind recreational weed, it's a little nauseating, you know, just because I feel like it's like fake homage when people, throw some medical stuff in there or whatever, but I really think we should honor that side of it more, and we should really push more for patient access and for people being able to grow their own medicine. And until we have that, we don't really have freedom from the plant. So, but that's my spiritual take on it, and that's how, I guess that's my testimony.
Thanks, Kaya.
Yeah, no,
Thank
we appreciate you sharing those stories. I think I actually was thinking that very similar thought about like today's market, because yesterday I was in San Francisco and I went to a shop, and I've gone to a couple shops in San Francisco recently around the city as I've been in there, and like it's just so lame nowadays. Like there's just such the products that people can get in the stores, they don't feel connected to this stuff and the quality's not there. And so I feel like a part of what we can do at CannaBuzz by connecting with folks like yourself and the others that we are fortunate to connect with is to we're like sharing the stories of this culture, and then we're trying to share it with everyone so that we can kind of carry it forward, because we all have to like carry this culture and these vibes forward, or else it's just kind of evaporate,
Yes, I.
So yeah, thanks for being a part of that.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you guys for putting out the message, providing the platform. And thanks to all the people out there in the world listening.
Yeah.
If nobody's listening and nobody's paying attention, who the fuck cares, right? But if we're doing something, that now we got something, right? I'm out here doing
we
it.
as a community,
We're doing it together, right? Let's go.
Yeah, we need to unify our voice, because the onslaught, we've been in a slow death for the last 10 years, and the onslaught's coming. So we gotta be ready to bring, like our last guest was decriminalize nature. And Larry, and the point we want to make is that we have a connection to nature that should not be legislated. There should be no rules about it. It should be our own personal connection with nature, and the way we make connection with water, and the way we make connection with fire, So we really want to push that message here. We can't thank you enough, Kaya, for coming on. It's been a fucking fantastic show. And tell people where they can find you and hear more about you and support you and buy your awesome genetics.
Neptune Seedbank, my boy over there. He's been a long-time partner.
Shout out.
Yeah. You can check me at Addict 369 in Paris, the green affiliate in South Africa. I've got some people out in Thailand. If you need to get connected, hit me up. The nw47@gmail.com. It's the direct link. You can find me online at Pacific Northwest Roots with a Z, and at Pacific Northwest Roots _ Kaya, Kaya.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, man. We really appreciate it. It was a really great time hanging out with you this afternoon. I really appreciated the stories you told. That last one hit close to heart. I said, is this guy not going to make me cry on YouTube? So thanks, man. I really appreciate it. And it really did hit home. And thank you so much for being a part of it. If you're watching this right now, make sure to support Neptune Seedbank and our friends Tiki, and also shout outs to Lost Coast Plant Therapy. You guys helped made this show possible. And of course, everyone in the chat, they've been really appreciating your story as well. But thanks everyone for watching. Hope you have a great rest of your day. And as always, growers love.
More love, Rastafari.